This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Now we're going to look at or revise some external factors that are important in strategic planning. This is part of the position analysis or part of the information gathering. And first we have the big macro environmental analysis, usually known by the acronym PESTEL, where we look at the political influences, economic, social, technological changes. Second E is environmental or ecological changes, and then there are legal changes. Remember, it doesn't matter whether you think tax is an economic effect or a political effect, whether it's a legal change, or even whether it's a social change, because there's an element of social policy in changing tax rates, maybe to make them more distributive. Doesn't matter. This calls itself a model, but it's not really much more than a checklist of big national, international events which are going to impinge on most organizations. What the organization should be doing is to say, well, I think this is going to happen, or this is a danger in the environment. How should I respond? Or perhaps it's good news in the environment. How should I respond? So if you think the economy is going to go up, don't just think, oh, the economy is going to go up. You should be thinking, well, so what? And the so what is, well, maybe we should be thinking of increasing our productive capacity so we can meet the increased demand. Sometimes it's worthwhile seeing the PESTEL in the three different kind of levels, if you like. There is local, what's happening locally in terms of the local economy, the local laws, the local market, the local rules maybe to do with release of effluent and so on. There is national, and then it can be large, global or international effects. But I'm not going to say very much more on PESTEL, except it's very worthwhile seeing how powerful the government can be. Government's really coming in the political, the economic and the legal here. All the kind of fingers of influence that governments now have. And here we have just a list. Don't you think of memorizing the list here, but just see all the kind of places that, or at least some of the types of places the government could influence a business, or some people would say interfere with a business. There is labour legislation, safety at work, health and safety legislation, employee protection, and rights to do with recruitment of people, equal opportunities, maximum working week, minimum pay, etc., etc. There is trade union legislation, which can affect the power of the trade union and what maybe it needs to do to call a strike. Consumer protection legislation. What happens if you buy something that doesn't work? Is there a legal right for you to take it back to the shop, get your money back? What happens if you buy something and it actually injures you? What are your rights then on the law? Exchange rates. Governments often manipulate exchange rates or try to manipulate exchange rates, maybe to boost exports. Taxation, obviously. Antitrust. When you come to merge two companies together, then you get competition legislation or monopolies, anti-monopoly legislation coming in. And they maybe have to approve the merger. Maybe they can say they don't allow it to go through because it puts too much power in the hands of one producing organization. Business legislation, for example, different contract law, different agency law, partnership law, and so on. Different ways in which maybe you can form companies, different sorts of companies that you can form. Under what circumstances do you enjoy limited liability, when do you lose limited liability, and so on. Social legislation, like welfare benefits. In the UK, we've recently had very large changes on pension legislation, where nearly every employer, no matter how small, has to provide their employees with a pension. Supply side policies. Supply side policies is to do with how easy it is to have new suppliers coming in. And if you have a highly protected industry, the government can pass legislation almost guaranteeing a legal monopoly to some suppliers, or making the requirements to kind of get the license, if you like, to supply very difficult. It also comes in supply side policies to do with how easy can you close down a factory, how easy can you make people redundant. That's affecting the supply side of labour. If labour is assured of a job, they can never get the sack, then you find it's very hard to recruit people, because nobody would kind of, why would you leave a job if it's kind of yours for life, is the idea. And then green policies, externalities. How are you going to pay for releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? Should there be a tax on it? Because other people are going to be affected by it. How should you, if you're using lorries on roads and so on, you're taking up space, you wear and tear on the roads and so on, you're causing congestion. How are you going to be made to pay for the use you're making of environmental resources? And the externalities is really the effects that other people suffer that maybe you're not having to pay for. Michael Porter identified 7 ways in which a government can affect the structure of an industry. So there is capacity expansion. So capacity expansion, for example, giving grants to companies to start up, encouraging startups, particularly maybe in industries which the government wants to encourage. Or the government could say you're not allowed to start up because we want to protect the existing people who are in the industry. Demand. Demand is affected simply by government spending. In the UK, most Western countries, the government spends roughly between 40 and 50% of all money spent in economies. And if the government says, I'm going to pull back a little bit, I don't want to borrow so much, the government stops spending, then there's a fantastic effect on industries. Divestment and exit. How easy is it for companies to leave a business? What are the penalties, say in redundancy payments for leaving? What sort of maybe consultation exercise you have to go through before you can close down a factory, even if it's pretty obvious to everybody that's probably surplus to requirements. Control of emerging industries. Are we going to allow them in easily, or are we going to keep them out? Are we going to give people protection for a little while? Entry barriers, goods coming into the country, quotas and tariffs. A quota is a maximum number of units which are allowed to be imported. A tariff puts a great big tax on imports. And again, the idea is that it's going to be protecting the home industries. Competition. Does the government encourage competition, or does it try to prevent competition? What attitude does the government take? For example, current example is Uber. So we have obviously traditional taxi firms, many taxi drivers very highly qualified in the knowledge of geography and so on of particular cities. And then you have Uber coming in, where you can dial up a taxi on your smartphone. The taxi driver doesn't know the geography as well, but do you need to if you have sat-nav and so on there? And governments have been very different in different towns and in different countries about how difficult they've made it for Uber to provide taxi services. A new product adoption. Governments can encourage new technology by making it relatively easy for people to go through maybe regulatory requirements to use that new technology. Or what they can do is they can put massive barriers in front of new product adoption by making it very difficult and expensive for companies to get the required permission, if you like, to sell that product. Of course, it's very necessary in some types of product to have care when adopting new products. For example, in pharmaceuticals, you'd expect reasonable clinical trials and so on to be going on. But a compromise has to be made. The more and more you test a new drug, Okay, you're maybe making it safer and safer, or identifying the people who are going to be damaged by it, but also you're postponing and postponing and postponing the people, or the good it might do to people who can be benefiting from that new drug. So we need some sort of balance to be struck within that. But sometimes, of course, it's done for uh, uh, political reasons, that you make it difficult for products to come in, very often to protect existing old-fashioned businesses. And it doesn't usually work in the long term. Once a technology has been invented, it tends to be like holding the tide back. Governments might slow down the adoption of it a little bit, but very, very rarely indeed are they going to prevent new technology prevailing. Finally, on external factors, we'll revise Porter's 5 forces. If you remember what the 5 forces does, well, PESTEL was the macro environmental factors. The 5 forces kind of zoom us down into an industry sector. So remember, it is an industry sector which this is dealing with, like the car industry, or the newsprint industry, or the television industry, or the supermarket industry. And it's looking to see how easy is it for companies in that sector to make good profits, by which we mean profits which give the shareholders an adequate return, and profits which allow enough reinvestment and development and so on by the company to keep it at the top. What we're not interested in is just clinging on with little profits that don't allow us to develop new products or to promote them well. We want good profits for what's called sustained competitive advantage. And you remember that Porter said there were these 5 forces that can make it easier or difficult or attractive or unattractive for companies. First of all, competition or rivalry can go from perfect competition, lots and lots of little companies all competing together all the way through to monopoly. Fairly obviously, you're going to have an easier time if you're a monopolist. If you're in perfect competition, there's always these little competitors trying to, make one on you, pass you if you like, always trying stuff out. You're always having to kind of respond to them and so on. With a monopolist, you've kind of got the place to yourself. Of course, it doesn't guarantee a profit. You could be a monopoly supplier of something nobody wants, but it's going to give you much more freedom. What you should always be doing, again, like PESTEL, you shouldn't just do the analysis and kind of say, oh, that's kind of interesting. You'd be saying, and so what? What are the implications there? So if your monopoly position is better, you want to try and move towards there. And the sort of things that could do it would be takeover, mergers. It could be maybe you dropping your price for a little while, you've got plenty of cash in the bank, and your poor rival can't match it, and you push them out of business in some way. But we're thinking of that. New entrants, people sitting outside, see you're profitable, thinking of coming into the business. What we want in there is a barrier to entry. So things like high capital expenditure is a barrier. It doesn't stop it, but it slows it down. If you have to go and raise 20 million before you can build your factory, then that makes it a little bit harder, a little bit riskier. Know-how is a big barrier to entry. The business you're in is quite complex, and therefore you need people with skills to get into it. There's a risk that they get into it and don't do it right, and so on there. Sometimes it can be legislation or regulation, that the regulations are very, very stringent, and it's quite hard for people to get a license to trade. Any barrier to entry is good news for the people who are there at the moment. Buyers and suppliers, kind of two sides of the same coin, really. If you're selling 80% of your output to one buyer, then you are in a pretty weak position. That buyer can nearly insist on you dropping your price by 25%, knowing that you can't afford to say no and risk losing this major customer. Similarly, if a very important component comes from one supplier, kind of monopoly supplier, that the supplier can double the price really of this unique component, and you have to pay it. Otherwise, you can't make the products. What you're doing in both cases is trying to reduce the risk from these very powerful buyers and suppliers here. It could be done by having long-term contracts with them. So instead of living from transaction to transaction, say, well, let's sign a 3-year contract for supplying my goods to you or buying the goods from the supplier. What you talk in terms of buyers is you try and get what are called switching costs. Look after them really well so that they know if they switch to somebody else, even though they might be slightly cheaper, it's going to be more bother. These other suppliers will not supply as well there. Switching costs, giving them a really good service, tying them in. These are ways of hanging on to your buyers in more than just price. What you might decide to do with your suppliers, if you're really worried, is to take them over. If there's a monopoly supplier of a very important component, one of the things you should be worried about is a competitor taking over that supplier and then them cutting you off. So what you might want to do is to take them over to give yourself assurance of supply, or else maybe, set up your own kind of supply chain, start making a component yourself if you could. Substitutes really in a way comes through technology. Remember in PESTEL there was a T for technology. Substitutes are a new way of really giving the same service or product or same end result to a customer, but by radically different means. So cell phones versus conventional landlines, those were substitutes there. And once a substitute has been invented, as with all technology, you can't really hold it back very well. You have to kind of live with it. So a substitute, I suppose, in a way to ordinary shopping, is shopping by Amazon. So instead of having to go out down to the centre of town to buy a book in a bookshop, or many other things now, but let's say buy a book in a bookshop, you order it through Amazon and maybe it is delivered on your e-reader, your Kindle or something of that sort. In a way you're getting the same result. I can read a book, but by radically different means. You can't really stop these, but the only thing you can really do is to try to embrace them. So now many of the maybe large print organizations, as well as selling their own printed hard copy books, they will also sell ebooks, not necessarily through Amazon, but you can elect to download it immediately over the internet. So in a way you can't fight them so much as join them in the substitutes. But again, always be thinking, this is happening, this is my position, my condition. How can I improve it? That's what the purpose of all of this analysis is to try to improve your position or to safeguard your position, or perhaps to weaken your competitors' positions.